right. Well, thank you all for joining us today for this important discussion on the future of e-governance and digital trust. It is a privilege to explore this transformative topic with our distinguished panel of experts. I'm Sally Kidd. I am your moderator today. I bring over 2 decades of experience as a broadcast journalist and national correspondent in Washington, D.C., where I've spent years covering government and politics and navigating complex policy landscapes. Our conversation today examines how digital identity can modernize government services, improve efficiency, and empower citizens. So over the course of the past few years, we have seen rapid digital transformation across many sectors, but government processes often struggle to keep pace. Today, we're going to discuss how a unified digital identity strategy can bridge this gap and create more responsive, efficient government services. To help us navigate this complex topic, we have 3 experts joining us. Jeff Frazier is a former head of global public sector at Snowflake and former FBI agent. He is a tech executive with extensive experience in digital transformation and public sector technology implementation. His leadership roles span Cisco, Microsoft, boards of director to private equity and VC-backed startups, and as a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. And then Tina Burgess, as a Senior Director of Public Sector Solutions at Merit. Tina leverages her extensive background in product marketing and technology to drive innovative solutions for government operations and citizen services. And James Smack, Chief Deputy Comptroller for the state of Nevada, has led significant modernization efforts in government finance and currently serves as an advisory member to the Core Nevada Project, bringing unique insights into implementing digital solutions in government. We will reserve the last 15 minutes for audience Q&A, so please submit your questions via the chat box, the Q&A chat box here in Zoom. Tina, Jeff, and James, thank you for being here today. Let's dive in. So, Tina, to kick things off, help us understand why we are here talking about digital identity. We know in today's digital age, citizens expect instant interactions with organizations, but government processes often lag behind. Hasn't the government already gone through a digital transformation? Why are we still seeing time and cost inefficiencies?
You know, Sally, that's a great starting point for us to kind of kick off with here today. And it's important to recognize the fact that we have seen digital transformation in government over the past couple decades. We don't have to go to the DMV to renew our driver's licenses anymore. Thank goodness. We can still apply for programs from our mobile phones. There are ways that digital transformation has affected our everyday lives. However, there's still possibility for additional kind of improvements on that front. We have such immediate expectations or immediate gratification expectations these days, where we can deposit checks directly from our phones into our bank's accounts. And we're still sometimes using fax machines or waiting for humans to digitally approve, to approve certain points of our applications. There are still significant time inefficiencies, which lead to cost inefficiencies in today's world. So while we do want to tip our hats to all the great work that has been done, there's still opportunity for additional improvement. So I think what we're here to talk about today is kind of that next wave in digital transformation that we're looking at.
Yeah, it's exciting to think about. And Jeff, from your perspective, why do you think this matters for efficiency improvement in government? And can you explain why meeting these expectations is so crucial for the next phase of digital transformation in government and how it can ultimately save both time and money for government agencies and the public as well? And I think we need to hear you, Jeff.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Sally. Here's how we should think about this. Digital identity is a representation of a person's real self in an online world. And digitizing and credentialing is proof from the authorizing body that you are who you are and what you've earned, the statements of truth about you are in fact authentic. So as an example, your driver's license or perhaps a license to practice law. So why is this important for government achievement and economic development? Well, in a world that's on the move, and the role of credential identity is critical to get to work faster and become eligible for benefits of payment and to avoid being taken advantage of. And I think people underestimate that, how that trend, especially with the role of AI and what's happening in that category. So digital identity, a few remaining categories that have been platformed per se, meaning that there's still old antiquated systems of how you credential and how you certify statements of truth and facts. So before credit cards were issued, what steps did you have to take to get a small loan from a bank? How did you communicate before mobile phones were mainstream? We're in that trend now where we're starting to see that the trust and identity and how you in your credentialing and the statements of truth about you are becoming mainstream. So by certifying these individual truths, you put them into a digital format, create this enormous market efficiency and these productivity gains. That just benefits the government, but it also benefits transparency. It changes investment structures. And currently governments spend hundreds of millions of dollars in workforce programs. And so when you implement a plan or a strategy, the investment gets more precise. It helps people get to work faster, gives citizens, frankly, more empowerment to manage their private information. And it tremendously reduces fraud and improper system payments. So it finally puts it to work. I think that's a key point, is when you are able to take a unique characteristic, digitize it, and it can put it to work, meaning more proactively. For instance, what student grants are available to me? What jobs are available for my certification? That shift has taken place now. So it's very promising. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, we're so used to having everything at our fingertips these days, and it is hard to imagine a time before we had cell phones, et cetera. James, you have a ton of experience in the public sector. You've dealt with all of this firsthand. What are your thoughts here?
Well, a lot of it does come down to a lot of it has the problems of getting states on board with digital identity. A lot of it has to do with the siloing between agencies. DMV has their own little fiefdom, so to speak, and then you have the department, like the unemployment department, has their own. Controller's office does their own thing, and they're all disjointed systems, and none of them are really communicating with each other. So where I come into this, I look at it from the perspective of, first of all, transparency is a big thing in our office. We put our open checkbook up about a year ago, showing all the transactions that the state makes on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, yearly basis, up on an online searchable format. So every taxpayer in the state of Nevada can be our auditors, as far as I'm concerned. And they have brought plenty of questions about different things that they've seen in our spending patterns and that type of thing. And so we were able to bring all that solution together into one particular solution, but we're still disjointed when it comes to identity. Everybody's doing something different. I like what DMV is doing, because DMV has got a system now where you type in your driver's license number, it sends the associated email, a 8-digit password. You put that in, you logged on, you can register your car, you can renew your driver's license, or what have you. But I go look at what unemployment does, and it's just it is an archaic system that just takes a lot longer, and it actually is a manual process where somebody actually has to put their hands on it to identify somebody. There has to be a better way that we are able to do this as a state. And that was part of the reason that interested me in participating in this webinar, learn a little bit more about this from a state perspective. I'm always eager to learn. I'm always wanting to learn more about new technology. That's one thing that I learned over the course of my career, is not to fear technology, but to embrace it. Change is going to be part of the process. The one thing you got to worry about with state employees and folks that have been around for 25, 30 years doing the exact same thing is that they are adverse to change. And that's part of the fight that we have to work with in state government all the time.
Yeah, that's true on that point, James. And, we've all been so frustrated when we've had to deal with different government agencies with different processes of just trying to get things done, standing in line. Why can't this be easier? I think we've all asked.
Speed of government is a real thing.
Exactly. And Jeff, back to what you mentioned about statements of truth about people. What role does the government play as a steward of these statements of truth, and why is this so important?
So how do you know you were born on your birthday, right? The government certifies your identity through a series of truths. They are the authorizing body. That's a key control point. Your birth certificate, government issued IDs, passports, etc. So how do you manage your personal information and then grant permission to who can have access? That is the empowerment that we're talking about, the change that we're seeing with the role of digitized identity. So the important trend to understand here is that shift, the modernizing identity. That's the big shift. So as an example, let me give you an example. So you're a spouse of a military veteran, and let's say you're a certified public accountant, CPA. So when that military veteran is transferred to another state or another geography, you have to recertify with that new state. And even though you're credentialed for the US, you have to recertify with that state. And so therefore you have to go to that Secretary of State and issue paperwork. And then that state contacts the previous state. And it goes through these series of iterations around paper and systems. And it could take 6-8 months. But when you have a legally enforced credentialed identity, the process takes minutes.
Yeah,
That's
Tina, yeah, go ahead,
No,
Jeff.
I think that's what we're seeing in the trend. That's the advantage of reducing time, getting people work faster, and making more assured that you are who you are.
Right, and Tina, let's hear from you, your take on this digitizing statements of truth, creating digital identity ecosystems, and how can that simplify some of these everyday transactions for individuals and businesses like Jeff is talking about?
Sure, absolutely. We're talking about these time and cost inefficiencies, and there's countless examples that we can point at. And we're not pointing fingers, we're just looking to solve problems. But where the Social Security Administration's published goal is 215 days to process a disability application, that's 7 months for an individual without income potentially, as they're awaiting kind of that approval into that program. Or we're looking in California at a 12-week backlog to process electricians' certifications to get them to work. While at the meantime, there's a huge shortage in qualified electricians to work within the state. So we're seeing these discrepancies that have potential to be solved with digitizing these statements of truth. And as we're talking about that, we're moving to this new world of actual digital data points for those digital identity points. This is so much more than taking a picture of your driver's license and uploading it somewhere. We're moving forward to kind of a digital data point that is usable within an automated process to be quickly identified and verified as approved to be able to move forward. A lot of the issues within these backlogs that we're seeing here today are the actual manual verification of those digital identity points in order to move forward. So Jeff was talking about the military spouses and how when they transfer states, they're running into these issues. Well, that military spouse has to go to their existing state. They have to get proof of their credentials. So that's time there. Then they have to figure out what the requirements are in the new state. They have to share them over there. And then the people in the new state have to verify them. So there's multiple steps that take additional time kind of across the board. What we're looking at is a world where we can automate some of those processes. And the way that we're going to get to that point is with those digital data points that become useful within those processes so that we can expedite them and see those time and eventually cost savings.
Okay, so Tina, going back to your example of the 215 days for approval for, say, disability benefits, we're talking about something that really impacts a person's health, their livelihood, their families, just living. When we move toward digital identity ecosystems, how much time, from the 215 days, how are we shortening that?
Sure. We're going to go from that 7-month time frame to weeks, if not days, to be able to approve those points. What we're doing is we're taking all that data that we're sitting on right now and we're making it useful, right? We're getting usable data that is also trusted at the same time. To Jeff's point about kind of governments being the steward of these statements of truth, these data points are still coming from the trusted organizations that have always issued them. We're just kind of converting them into a different format so that they're usable in different transactions in a different way.
Okay, much more efficient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all right. I just want to pause here for a quick reminder. Everybody, please use the Q&A chat box and drop any questions you may have. James, let's talk about if you could give us some examples of opportunities to create time and cost efficiency gains that you've seen in your area, in your work in the public sector.
If there's anything in the public sector we should have learned from, it should have been the COVID-19 pandemic. That was something that should have been an eye-opener for all of us, especially I was working in the private sector at that point in time, but I had been in the public sector prior. I'm back in the public sector now, but I was in the private sector at that point in time. But just being able to access things like state unemployment, health, Medicaid benefits, those type of things, all the disjointed systems that people had to go through, at least in the state of Nevada. I can't speak for the other 49 states. Everybody does their own thing. But at least in the state of Nevada, we were having major league backlogs. We were having amazing cases of fraud, especially in the unemployment market. Going into the federal world, I was working in banking. I was helping people with the PPP loans. I don't know if anybody remembers that program that came out. Paycheck Protection Program, I think is what it stood for, and the amount of fraud that was rife with, even on the federal level. I understand how it happened on the federal level with PPP loans, because they rolled those out so quickly, and they were trying to get money into people's hands so quickly. I don't think there was an awful lot of verification going on, but I don't think the mechanisms were in existence either. I think it was a matter that we all realized through the pandemic how easy it was to not only to not be able to access, how hard it was to access benefits for the people that needed it, and how easy it was to commit fraud because there wasn't the right gatekeeper, the right gates in place to stop it from happening. And I think what we're talking about here is being ready for the next big thing. I mean, yeah, day-to-day processes are great when things are going great with the economy. But what happens if we have another black swan event like COVID or something of that nature? I don't think our state's any more ready for it now than we were in 2020, and that's kind of sad. And I think a lot of other states are going to run into the same issue. We haven't learned from the past. But again, it's another situation of moving at the speed of government. There's enough people that are involved in government that know what happened, understand why it happened, and understand what it takes to replace it. But they can't all seem to get into one room and figure out that one viable solution to replace it with. That would be the one thing that we're talking about today. That one single source of truth, that one single source of identity that would put us in a position to be ready for that next state of emergency, however it presents itself. The pandemic was certainly a large across the world event, but even a smaller event, even something as small as say 500 people gets displaced up at Lake Tahoe due to a forest fire. They need to be able to find the benefits quickly, whether it be on the state level, whether it be on the federal level. And I don't think our state is ready for even something as small as that.
You know, and James, when you're talking about such inefficiency and such time that it takes to accomplish tasks by the government, we're talking about taxpayer dollars here. We're talking about not just the government being inefficient and all of us having to spend more time and more frustration getting things done, but we're actually talking about real money, real taxpayer dollars. So we're all impacted. And when the government is rushing money out the door in an emergency, which is understandable, there's bound to be some of that waste and inefficiency. So what we're talking about here is a way to improve the system and to solve that problem. And Jeff, I would just love to hear your take on how might digital identity ecosystems change this relationship between citizens and government services so that we can make things more efficient and waste less taxpayer money.
Yeah, I think James had a good point. Look, if you look at how enterprise companies are really growing fast and how markets move, et cetera, if you just think about how digitizing something makes it faster, more assured. So digital ecosystems provide the opportunity for, in our case, with the governments, for transparency, for speed, and for assurance. High value transactions, whether if you can digitize identity and credential that and make it safe, anything that's illegal or a financial transaction, you can assure that. So you create that efficiency, right? So in terms of workforce development, a state has an opportunity to create an inventory of existing workforce skills, understanding where people are and when you can point them to value when you need them the most. This is super important for job creation, for educated investment into workforce programs, and huge reductions to James' point, in fraud and misrepresentation. If you just think about environmental shock for a moment, like hurricanes or wildfires, states and multi-state areas can have a skills inventory of where to provide fast help and investment. This key is trust. So digital identity in the ecosystems allow for stronger trust between the government and its citizens. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, along those lines of building trust, James, back over to you. What are the key requirements for building trust in digital identity ecosystems? What are some of the security and privacy protection measures that need to be put in place for these systems?
I think a lot of folks still have concern about providing all this information to a government entity, even though, honestly speaking, a lot of this information came from that same government entity. Your driver's license came from the state government. Your birth certificate was in some way, shape, or form involved a local or a county government. Everything from your birth certificate to your death certificate involves the government somehow, some way. So part of it is getting people over that fear factor. Why would I want to put everything in just one place where some hacker can jump in and get all my information and make it that much easier to steal my identity? And then it's also the other part of the trust factor is how well does the individual trust the state government to safeguard that information? In the case of Nevada, we haven't had any major data breaches, but that doesn't mean. I always think of organizations in two types of organizations: those that have had a major data breach and those that will at some point in time in the future. So how do we assure our citizens that we're protecting their information and that we're not just trying to gather all this information on some kind of a big brother front or something like that, where we're just trying to have everything in one place, and that way we can use it for whatever we want. And I think that's part of the pitch that our citizens would need to hear is how are we as the state government going to be entrusted with this information when we did such a bad job of distributing unemployment benefits 4 years ago during the COVID pandemic, and things like that. Those are questions that we have to be able to ask and answer competently to make something like this work in the state of Nevada.
Yeah, that does seem like a bit of a hurdle. And Tina, I mean, how do you answer that question? What makes a digital identity ecosystem trusted, and how do we ensure that citizens can feel secure?
Absolutely. To James' point, there's a lot of concern that goes into kind of digitizing that, but at the same time, these are the same organizations that we're trusting with those statements of truth now. It's simply a different format in terms of how we're approaching it. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're just making those data points usable. They're still coming from the same organizations. And so they're still trusted data points. But on the other end, the way that we're going to kind of satisfy the actual individual is we're putting them in control of their data. And by putting the individual in control of their data, where they get to decide who sees what when, that means that they don't have to trust. They're in control. For example, today, if I am kind of giving somebody proof of my age, I might hand over my driver's license today. They're going to be able to see my birthday. But they're also going to be able to see my height, my weight, my eye color, my address, additional information that they don't need to see. In a digital identity ecosystem world, we would have the ability to simply share out kind of an approval of that one birthday data point. Is this person old enough to do what they are trying to do? Yes, and it stops there. So by putting the individual in control of their data and allowing them to decide who sees what when, then it not only saves time, but it's actually more secure than the processes that we are going through today.
But how do we get there, Tina? I mean, it seems like such a big jump to get a multifaceted digital, to get to multifaceted digital identity. Is there a way to build up, to scale up to this larger solution?
There has to be. I wish my magic wand could kind of be waved in the air and all our identity kind of information could go online, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. There's kind of two things that we're looking at. One point that I want to make is that the benefit has to outweigh the concern, and that kind of goes back to the digitizing trust. I just got my mom set up on Apple Pay this week, and she was like, I've always been concerned about this. Like, I don't know if I want to. And I said, okay, well, here's the deal. If you ever forget your wallet, you can always use your phone to go ahead and pay. And she's like, oh, and if you don't want to carry all your credit cards, you could have multiple ones in there. Oh, okay. She can see the benefit of using that. And that's the same concept here, is we're going to have to get people on board with seeing the advantage in kind of this improved, more efficient system. But in order to get there, it's not like we can just simply have everyone hop on board. To James's point, we're working with a lot of different siloed systems. And so the way that we see an opportunity to move forward on this, baby steps kind of coming together to be building blocks to a larger solution, is by digitizing different pieces of each of these digital identity points. So the way that we're tackling it at Merit is we are approaching these different government programs that take in these different digital identity points and allowing those to be digitized. And then each time that those types of transactions are added kind of to the ecosystem, we're continuing to build. Everything doesn't have to be done in all one big fail swoop. That's not going to happen. It's going to be too costly to actually execute. So we're taking it step by step with the ability to kind of build on kind of each of those different pieces.
Okay, I want to pause here because we have a good question from Andy, who is asking, what are some of the anticipated risks and implications related to digitizing trust and creating these digital identities accessible across government systems? Who wants to take that?
I'll tackle that first. Part of the problem we have here in Nevada, and you mentioned it in my introduction, is that I'm part of the Core NV modernization project. What the Core NV modernization project is we're modernizing our state accounting and HR systems. Our state accounting and HR systems went into service as a mainframe server system programmed in COBOL in 1999. By way of comparison, it is not only old enough to vote, it is old enough to drink, and it is almost old enough to be too old to date Leonardo DiCaprio at this point in time. So the fact of the matter is that base system, we really need to modernize that before we could start building on solutions for that for that modernization. Otherwise, we're going to have to build this solution into a COBOL solution. My COBOL programmers have about the same amount of gray in their hair that I do if I let my hair grow out. And I know what they like in their coffee because I make sure that they have proper coffee on a daily basis because I want to keep them happy because it's hard to find COBOL programmers. And I'm hoping that at this point in time, we're looking at our first phased go live on January 1st of this new modern solution which is going to be moving everything off the servers and into the cloud. It's going to be putting things into a more user-friendly format for people to be able to do their jobs within the state. I think that's our path forward. I think continuing that initiative into a better solution for identifying our citizens and making it easier for them to interact with the state. I think it starts with having the proper solutions in place for the state, having this all-encompassing solution that's going to handle our payroll, our budget, our HR, all of our financial transactions, everything up and down from the beginning of the budget process all the way through the legislative session to the approval of the budget to actually spending the money through the system is all going to be in one system now, as opposed to several disjointed systems that are all in little siloed portions of the state. So we're starting to break down a lot of those silos with the Core NB project. And that's going to need to be an ongoing modernization effort beyond just modernizing the financial and HR systems. What I would like to see over the next several years is to see that be a full modernization system that modernizes every facet of state government and moves everything forward. And like I like to tell people when I'm talking about Core NB, we're going to drag everybody kicking and screaming into the 21st century, whether they like it or not. And I think that's what has to happen. And I think that the good thing is we have a governor that believes in this solution, that believes in what we're trying to accomplish, and trying to make things easier for our citizens and easier for our people that are doing the day-to-day operations of the state. Make the state easier to do business with, not harder.
Well, James, we look forward. Well, it's exciting to hear that, and we will certainly be following along. And Jeff, talking about putting this into practice, how do the digital records create overarching views of programs and credentials and open the door to additional insights?
Yeah, I think to Andy's question was paramount to this. A couple truths. So it was the same wave we saw. If you think about how we've evolved and improved our productivity, our efficiencies as just societies, it's extraordinarily safe to fly. It's extraordinarily safe. It's extraordinarily safe to transact on the internet in a financial transaction. So you imagine the fear it was in 1999 when you weren't sure if you could actually do something on the internet because it was going to be insecure. So I think when you look at trends, what's happening here, if you think about decentralized identities, really what it's interoperability is what we're talking about, really. So when you think about it, in my hand, I have a letter from Ticketmaster because I've been compromised. And so I would rather have the empowerment to only submit an encrypted piece of information to be a part of a Ticketmaster transaction than give the entire driver's license and everything else that I needed to register. So everything about a person that's published is on the internet somewhere. That's what I would rather have it in a more secure, as it was said so eloquently. Look, it's just a new format that's more secure. That's what we're talking about. So when you look at one way to think about, if you can, to certify a digital identity in these statements of truth, the government and a commercial enterprise, if you choose, can speed and ensure high value transactions. I would keep going back to the high value transactions, whether it's a legally enforceable transaction through a court, et cetera, or if it's financial. As an example, student loans, student grants, home loans, eligible loans, notarized documents, et cetera. When you think about when you certify and credential those, you have this living, breathing understanding, this observatory of skills and job matching. That's the shift. You can, citizens have more control because it's decentralized, what they want to share and who they want to give the information to. And then marketplaces form around those skills. That's the opportunity for states to think about. We're already seeing this. So, and final point, how many times have you entered the United States from overseas travel and had to fill out the same form, the same information, the same name, same address, et cetera? This is why the US Customs invented global entry, was to reduce that and make it very efficient. So you're pre-registered, essentially it's credentialed. So when you come in, it's much more efficient to make entry and it's much more assured. That's the trend that we're seeing, and it's coming. It hasn't hit scale, it's just coming.
Right. Going back though to getting buy-in on all of this, what incentives, Jeff, do you think are needed for individuals, government agencies, private sector organizations to adopt these digital identity ecosystems?
Yeah. So first, I think we have to recognize that we're well beyond the necessity of a fax machine. Second, we have to recognize that over 1 billion people in the world are on the move, just in migration patterns alone. And I think third, you have to recognize that nearly every age-appropriate person just in North America has a mobile digital device. So if you just think about those conditions, to improve the speed and the service and the enormous economic impact, states need to align the incentives, the policy, economic, and technical incentives. That's to begin. So start small. We always say start with like digitizing your professional and your leisure licenses, cosmetology, vehicle registration, inspection certifications, hunting and fishing licenses. Start small so you can see the impact that'll have versus doing everything all in. Start small, and then you can align incentives and turn the comfort zone temperature, how you want it as you start to roll out, how you create and enable these high value transactions to take place in the States.
And James, going back to looking at what's going on in states like Nevada, how could impact analysis of digital identity programs help government agencies improve their services in Nevada and beyond?
I think it would be an amazing add to the modernized solutions that we're working on within the state of Nevada right now. Making it easier for our citizens to work with the state, make it as easy for our citizens to work with the state as it is to work with any other entity that's out there in the private sector. That should be the overall goal of anybody that's getting involved in state service right now, regardless of whether your state is operating on a 25-year-old accounting system. I mean, we have some states out there that are operating on 40-year-old accounting systems that are still working on green screens. So, but having that ability to be able to identify and have it across the board, whether you're working with DMV, whether you're working with unemployment, whether you're working with our debt collection division, whether you're working with the Secretary of State, a single source of identity would be that key, kind of your pass key to get into the state of Nevada. That would be something that I would like I'd like to see as part of our future vision of something that we would want to get involved in and talk with our state CIO and that type of thing, because I think that's where that conversation needs to start. A lot of in this last legislative session, the state CIO became a cabinet member in the governor's office. That just is a testament to how important information systems and being able to communicate clearly with our citizens is to our governor, and should be to all of us. I mean, a lot of the reason why I'm back here now is because I'm working for a controller that shares a lot of the same vision that I do. He's looking for modern solutions. He's looking for more transparency. He wants to make things easier to find with the state. Whole reason behind the open checkbook. That was kind of our tip of the spear on our entire modernization solution for the finance and HR systems. Let's put this out there so every Nevada citizen can see what we're spending our money on, how much money we're getting in. And I mean, they could look up and see this is how much James Smack's paycheck was in March of 2023 if they want to. And I have no problem with that level of transparency, but that should be across the board, and it should be a one-stop shop. I think the problem we're looking at is everybody still has their own disjointed solutions. And I think it's going to start with the state CIO and folks like myself and different agencies that are like, yeah, we need to be on board with the state CIO to make these solutions work. And we need to do that. We need to do this for the benefit of all Nevadans.
Yeah, there's a great question from Nicole in the audience related to this. What can government learn from the private sector on this?
Having spent time in both, I can speak to that a little bit. It still could be something. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that use what they call master password programs. And I'm kind of looking at this solution kind of like as a master password program to be able to communicate with government entities. Master password program is basically storing, you have one password that you need to recall, and then you can get in and find out what your other 47 passwords are on the other 47 different solutions that you need to sign into. And I thought that was amazing and I'm only using 47 because that's just an example of how many that I have that are in my master password program. But I have 47 different things that I could sign into at any point in time. And the nice thing about the master password program is it helps security because I can have it randomly generate 25 character passwords and things like that are very hard to crack. So, but how do we roll that out for the government is more what we're looking at, because there is no real master password program for the state. DMV has their solution, and unemployment has their solution, and Secretary of State has their solution, and a lot of it still has a human being on the other end of it has to verify things. And I think taking that human factor out and making it more of an instant electronic verification would make things so much more efficient.
Jeff, do either of you want to weigh in on what government could possibly learn from the private sector on this?
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry. Was that for
Go
me,
ahead.
Sally?
Absolutely.
Both of you. Go ahead, Jeff, and then we'll go to Tina.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. When you think, James' point, what we learned from the private sector, the motivations are different because there's market timing and a lot of profitability, et cetera. But if you back up and think about the role of when you can digitize a record, you increase its usefulness. Let's just start with that. So I not only make that efficient, but I can also make it assured of what I do with it and where it goes. I can now, in a private sector, I can now remit insurance payments much more faster and much more securely. I take the latency out of a market. So instead of waiting for 60 days to reimburse something, I can do it in minutes. So you take that latency out, and what does that mean in terms of, let's say the insurance industry wants to work much closely with a site that's been destroyed and the building, how do you prove the building inspectors, or how do you improve the building industry is certified for certain things? Enormously would take a long time. I can do that in seconds. And I think that's the efficiency, what we say the market efficiencies are really, really important to learn from, at least to think about. So in terms of states, you'll have a much clearer understanding of inventories, reciprocal agreements with states and migration movements, and then allow people to get to work faster. I mean, fundamentally in the workforce world.
It's a great point, and that would be kind of something I'd point to as well in terms of being able to learn from the private sector. They have a little bit more flexibility in terms of with agility to be able to make adjustments in their processes, and part of that comes down to the fact that a lot of our kind of identity points come down to the state level within the United States. So Jeff was saying earlier how it's those professional licenses are handled at the state level. Our driver's license are handled at the state level. And we've got 50 states, multiple territories that are the sources of truth for those ID points. And so where private sector can kind of focus in on certain areas at the in the public area, we still have to kind of take it that step by step because of those different limitations that we're seeing there. But at the same time, we can take note of and learn from kind of the way that they are jumping in to make those processes more efficient on their end.
And Jeff and James, what would be some recommendations that you would have for state government leaders who are looking to implement digital identity initiatives?
I'll start, James, if it's all right. What I've seen work best are a sequence of self-identifying steps. Try to keep it simple. So first, if you're on a balcony, you're looking down, let's call it a state, identify the costs. How much is being spent collectively, not just in certain individual programs, but how much is being spent to manage, let's say, your professional licenses for the state? Then how to identify ecosystem partners who are working on overlapping topics, let's say a workforce or job programs, because there's a lot of overlap that could be identified in terms of how to address it and how to make it more efficient. Third is this notion of inventory, and identify all those in the state perspective, identify all those grant management programs and understand how much is unspent or unrealized program money that didn't go efficiently to where it's necessary or needed to go. How many students a year, with there's billions of dollars a year, goes unspent in student grants? Why is that? And so then the fourth is to essentially identify and encourage legislation that enables the states to have reciprocal agreements that they can share and receive professional licenses and skill digitized credentialing, so that you can make it easier and efficient for people to move around because of all the migration and mobility we have, certainly in the United States and around the world. It just would make that much more of a different experience, but make it more assured. And then the transactions would put integrity back in and trust back into high value transactions.
Jeff, you make an important point there. And one of the points you made off the top was the CPA that's moving from one state to another because their military spouse was transferred from Florida to Nevada, let's say. And we need, not only would this system be good for the citizens of Nevada, though, but we need to be able to have all 50 states have systems that are able to communicate with each other, whether it's the same system or not, to be able to bridge that communication gap and get that information from Tallahassee that we need to get that person working as a CPA, so I can hire from my office and help with my annual comprehensive financial report, because I could use a couple more CPAs, and we got a couple that are bottlenecked. I'd be certainly happy to talk to them and see if I could do what I could do to reduce the bottleneck and get them employed, because I know I could use a couple CPAs. I'm sure there's plenty of other folks in the state of Nevada that could use that as well. So that's an important point that you make, is how do we make this work interstate? I know how you can make it work in state, and how you can make the different organizations within the state work with each other, but how does that help that military transfer person or something like that when you don't have reciprocal agreements with other states? And that's an important point.
So we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about making things easier, we're talking about streamlining. And Tina, I'm wondering what role digital identities play in streamlining these massive programs that we have, social services, benefit programs. How could this help?
Sure, absolutely. We have a bunch of different fantastic programs that are available to individuals out there. But one of the biggest hurdles for those is simply knowing about those programs and accessing them. So whether it is unemployed individuals or low income individuals, have kind of applying to these different programs can be a rigorous step, in the sense that they have to prove a lot about their situation in order to qualify for it. And if they are low income, they have to state over and over again the kind of points about themselves that aren't very uplifting, and it can be weighing on them as they're kind of applying for them over and over again. And so there's an opportunity within these programs where an individual could submit for whether it's a social services or benefit program. And once they're accepted and those different data points have been verified, there would be another opportunity to say, have you considered these other programs that are also available to you based on those same data points? So all of a sudden, the onus isn't on them to understand what's available to them. We're able to kind of turn and put opportunities in front of them differently. For example, if I am unemployed or underemployed, Jeff was talking about different workforce development programs that are available out there, where these individuals could be upskilled in different areas for jobs that are available in their particular area. Well, that particular program could be placed in front of somebody. Oh, well, at the same time, we understand that you are on food stamps for a family of 4. You have children that need to be taken care of while you're attending these training programs. Well, there are childcare opportunities, and here is how you can apply for those. Additionally, The list kind of goes on, and there's just an opportunity to be able to reach out and put those in front of these individuals, as opposed to putting the work on them and putting the responsibility to figure out that they're available, and the sometimes monumental task of applying to all of them individually on their shoulders. But at the same time, what also helps is, on the other end, is proving the efficacy of these programs. As we're getting these digital data points on individuals, we can also track the impact that the programs are able to make in terms of tracking people's progress through the different programs. Where are we seeing fall off in the process? Oh, okay, let's kind of fix things up at that point, and make sure that we're getting more success kind of all the way through. The data that's available to us, not just on the individual data that's coming in, but the ability to kind of track that and make improvements and prove impact of these programs, we'll also see those results in this process.
So Tina and Jeff, what types of legislative or regulatory changes might be needed to enable digital identity ecosystems? Because we're talking about a significant change in the way government does business.
I think what we've seen is, first you get what you inspect. So I think the first step is to understand what current legislation exists that would be a blocker to enable some kind of a statewide, let's call it, strategy to credential people for workforce. Let's start simple with workforce or even professional licensing. And then but you also have to do an inventory of, again, the cost and the spend, and understand that most organizations, institutions I've seen, they look at it within the, they stack rank it within their own environment, their own administration, their own organization. But you got to kind of turn it on its side and look at this more holistically. And okay, wait a minute, what if we did this? What would be the economic impact to a state if I were able to enable and begin to turn this on in increments? It's enormous. And there's independent studies out, there's independent studies out there to prove this point. So legislatively, you look at what reciprocal agreements do we accept? What are the, with other states, how do we work with, even if you start with regional pacts, or you look at our state sharing, what standards do we set technically that we put in policy play? And then how do we tie legislatively, how do we look at policies to tie investment to economic development more closely? As an example, community colleges are the backbone of economic development and workforce in most states. How do you know if you would take hundreds of millions of dollars invested into HVAC or plumbing, or let's say welding or auto or any trade? How would you know, and what evidence do you have to say that's a smart thing to do? What does my inventory look like? So by looking at legislatively the combination of where economic impact hits, and then how do we begin to look at professional licensing in a more of an understanding of how we can create economic value for the state, that's where I think where it starts to look at what policies we need.
Great.
I'd add,
Go ahead.
yeah, I'd add on top of that is the simple we have to make it acceptable. And that's just it. In the same way that the reason that Apple Pay kind of was able to be utilized everywhere is because they changed out credit card processing terminals, right? And they were able to accept these kind of tap to pay transactions. And so in a similar way, we have to implement legislation and enforce the fact that these digital identity points can and should be accepted in the same way that those physical identity points should be as well. And so we have to enable those avenues for them to be able to be utilized, and not only enable, but push for them in order to make that possible.
Great
And I
point.
want to circle back to this one thing that Tina was saying, and that was about it was bringing all these systems together and like saying if they're applying for this, having a system that would say, well, what about this? What about this? I mean, I'll give a real good example of this. A friend of mine in Southern Nevada lost their job back in April. They apply for unemployment, they had to go into one system. To apply for housing assistance, they had to go to another system. To apply for food stamps because that person was a single mother with a 6-year-old, they had to go into another system. To apply for Medicaid, they have to go into another system. Why would we not just have one single sign-in where that person could basically apply for all 4 of those, or say they apply for 3 of them because of the combination of the 3 things they applied for? The system automatically recommends, hey, why don't you look into this as well? This is an available program for you as well. Or what other program did they miss during the course of applying for those 4 things? I mean, that would just be an amazing use of technology, and I would think make state government so much more, even more modern than a lot of the private sector solutions that are out there right now. I think that would be a massive step in state government modernization.
All right, we have just a few minutes left, so if you all have any questions, please drop them in the chat box. Wanted to talk a little bit about the future and looking ahead. How do you all think digital identity might evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? We're at this major transition with AI, so much going on in the tech space. What are you all thinking about that? Jeff?
The expectations of people now are to have a consumer-like experience. To Tina's seminal point, when you go up to a terminal and you transact, it's very efficient, very easy, and very, very secure, etc. So that expectation is just becoming more and more important for us to be productive and for us to have a way of life. Now you compound that with what's going on with AI and how it's becoming more democratized, where people can use information about something or someone else in a very different way. And so therefore you create this whole level of uncertainty about, well, there's everything from deep fakes, everything from voice manufacturing voice. And so the role of identity, to Tina's point, has to play a key role in securing the way who you are. We know who you are because it's already been published. But when you move around and operate, you want to be able to do that in a way that you have more control, more permission to do that without giving up everything. I think that's going to be such a key role. If I'm a state leader, I want to differentiate my economy on the role of identity, because I know what it can do economically. I know what it can do socially. I know what it can do for eligibility for benefits. That would be, I think that's the huge trend.
Well, Jeff, Tina, James, thank you all so much for this informative discussion. Want to thank everybody for joining us for this important conversation on digital identity ecosystems. We hope everybody found it informative and thought-provoking. As a reminder, Merit has published a comprehensive white paper on this topic, so we encourage you to download that for further insights. We've dropped a link in the chat box. Please visit Merit's website to learn more about digital identity solutions and their potential to transform government services. Please reach out if you have any questions. You can find us, reach out to the website, and we appreciate you joining us. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Thanks.